Welcome to Out with Dan, the podcast that spotlights and examines the voices of LGBTQ+ authors, characters, and our allies. Together, we lift our voices and we tell our stories. I'm Dan White. Join me as I chat with this week's author. Hello and welcome back to Out with Dan. Today I'm excited to talk to Rob Hart again. Rob is a USA Today bestseller. His Ash McKenna series, I believe there's 6 of those. He's the author of The Warehouse, Paradox Hotel, and last year's Assassins Anonymous, which in my personal opinion was probably the most inventive book of 2024, if not the best book of 2024. Welcome back, Rob.
Thank you so much for having me, Dan. I appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate you being back. So this book we're going to chat about today is the MEDUSA Protocol, and it is what I would call sort of the second edition of Assassins Anonymous, but it totally stands on its own as a standalone. So want to give us a little setup for the MEDUSA Protocol?
Yeah, sure. So, in the concept of Assassins Anonymous, you've got all these killers who, decide they don't want to kill anymore. So they get into a recovery program for killers called Assassins Anonymous. And in the second book, one of the members, Astrid, goes out. She just stops showing up to meetings one day, and everyone's like, well, she either went back to the life or she got killed, because that's usually how it goes here. But in reality, she's been kidnapped and thrown into a black site prison, and she has no idea why. So we've got, technically 2 stories in the sense that Astrid's trying to figure out why she's there and she's trying to get out. The rest of them are trying to find her, and, because she manages to get them a coded message so they know that she's alive. But there's also a lot about Astrid's past. We get into some flashback territory so we can talk about who Astrid is and how she became the person she is and how she got to this place where she was a professional killer.
And I thought you did that so well. Flashbacks, I think some people, as a reader, some people like flashbacks, some people don't. So I think it's always a little bit of a tricky territory, but you certainly give us Astrid's backstory so smoothly and so seamlessly. Do you keep a big timeline when you're writing?
I outline a lot, but I feel like my outline for this book wasn't as intense. I think I had like a pretty strong sense of where I wanted to take it, but that's also been the gift of this series is, my previous books, The Warehouse and Paradox Hotel, those were like big sci-fi speculative thrillers. And I mean, Paradox Hotel was time travel. Time travel is nuts. I'm never writing time travel again. But there's something about like these books, they feel like they're honed like a knife. They're a lot more straightforward. But also, like, I love these characters so much. I love their voices. So it feels very comfortable. These stories feel like they come a little bit easier.
Well, and you mentioned voices, obviously I'm so blessed because I get to chat with so many fabulous authors and I read so many wonderful works. And when I find an author who is really, really uber wonderful at voicing, it just thrills me. And your voicing is so spot on with these people, with your characters, because you don't even have to say Astrid said. You just have to have a conversation because we feel like we know them because you give us a clear picture of exactly who they are.
Yeah, and that's, I feel like I spend a lot of the beginning time thinking about that. And then I just kind of fall into the pace of it because, the challenge when you've got 2 characters who are supporting the story, both of whom are, very professional, very adept killers. Both of them have traumas. Both of them have their reasons for quitting. It's about finding the differences. What are the differences in their personalities? What are the differences in their past that brought them to where they are? How have their traumas informed who they are? And I think you can see, Mark is much more loquacious. He's funny. He was an orphan. He was always like begging for attention. Astrid has some really, I won't talk about it too much because people should read the book, but, Astrid has some really traumatic stuff in her past. She's more of a harder shell, and you can kind of see why. And I think it's, once I, understanding that is like the key to entry for me. And once I have that key, it's like, it feels like it moves a lot more smoothly.
Well, and I think for readers, I think if you're going to have a series, you do want the reader to be invested in the characters and their voices and their backstory as well, because, backstory does inform us where the character is today is always in relationship to where they were yesterday and before, because that's how humans are. whatever baggage or whatever wonderful things we bring to today, it's influenced by yesterday, no matter how much we want it not to be. It's always influenced.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, these books are really, I mean, yeah, they're about, super secret professional killers, but it's about trauma, and it's about wanting to change, and it's about wanting to be better. I mean, every book for me is, it's like a form of therapy, except it's better than therapy because I'm the one who's getting paid. And, it's always me trying to work out something for myself. And the question that I went into the first book asking, and that I'm still asking, is like, man, I hit my 40s, and I was like, am I a good person? I like to think that I am, and I've done things that I'm proud of, and I've done things that I'm not proud of. Things that I'm really, really not proud of. And so it's that question of, I want to be a better person. I want to be, for myself, for my daughter, so that I can be a good dad. And it's like, is change possible, and what does it take, and how do I do that? And as I'm asking myself these questions, I'm like, let's see how it plays out on the page, and then we'll take it from there.
Well, and so when we talked last time about Assassins Anonymous, there's a lot of metaphysical in both of the books. There's a lot of, and there's no preaching. It's just, a presentation of ideas. The one thing that I was really struck with in this book is the word grace, which anybody who's in recovery or just somebody who's enlightened, they know about giving grace to other people, but also to yourself. And that is something that I saw in your characters so eloquently stated this time, was grace, giving each other a break and understanding that we are humans. Yesterday influences today, today influences tomorrow, but not to be so hard on ourselves, because I think when you start reflecting back, it's easy to fall into a trap of, oh, I shouldn't have done this, or maybe I should have done that. That's always difficult because it sort of robs you of today's happiness.
Yeah, yeah. Grace is hard. Grace is hard, and like, I think about it on a day to day level where someone cuts me off in traffic. Like, my immediate reaction is to be like, I should run them off the road.
Right.
But then there's that part of me that's like, you know what? Maybe they're in a rush. Maybe they didn't see me. Maybe they're having a bad day too. Like, it could be any number of things. And I think there's another saying in AA that, like, anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Right.
Which it's true. And it's like, as you hold on to these resentments and this anger, it could really start to weigh heavily on you. And so I'm not always good at it, but I'm trying my best to kind of set my anger down and say, I didn't agree with that decision, but that person was in this place when they made it, and it's not my place to judge them,
Yeah,
because it was their decision to make, it wasn't mine.
yeah, and I'm a big believer in, this is my lane. Someone else has their own lane. We're going to get to wherever we're going when we get there. But try, because I grew up in a household with a mom who was very narcissistic. So it was my mom's way or the highway. There was no negotiation. There was no discussion. It was always her way. And of course, that has influenced me. And I fight that on a daily basis of reminding myself that just because I think differently than Rob or someone else doesn't mean I'm right. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean Rob's right or wrong. It just means that we disagree on something. And trying to find a way forward in that.
Yeah, there's a power and a comfort in being able to sort of let things go. And look, like, some things are hard to let go. Some traumas are too big. Some traumas just, like, you wear on your body like a scar, and that's just the way it is. And I'm not saying that, oh, like, something's bothering you, get over it. Like, it's a much more complicated process than that. But I've definitely found, again, like, as I'm getting older, the more that I'm able to just see things from other people's perspectives, and also take the things that are really bothering me and just kind of put them down and say, okay, you know what, this is here now, and I'm going to go worry about all this other stuff that's more important. I've found some degree of serenity. I'm looking for a little more, but I'm getting closer.
Me and you both, Rob. But maybe we can order some from Amazon. I don't know how
Yeah.
that works. So, all right. So now I have to ask some goofy personal questions. What do you got against olives, dude? I mean, really?
Olives are disgusting. Oh my
Oh,
god.
I love olives, especially black ones.
It's like eating brackish seawater. They're just the worst.
I don't. I mean, I certainly understand. I mean, so now should I assume you don't like mushrooms or coconut either?
Coconut, I'm kind of split on coconut, like coconut shrimp, like coconut fried. Certain preparations are coconut I can really get down with. Others doesn't really work for me. Mushrooms, I like a good mushroom, but mushrooms. The thing with mushrooms is that you have to sear the living shit out of them.
I agree.
You
I
really
agree.
got to cook them well because when they're like kind of spongy and mushy, they're not as good. But
They don't have much of a taste until you've tortured them a little bit.
yeah, but I made dinner for my partner recently. I went to an Asian market. I got some wagyu steaks, and then I got some enoki mushrooms, and I fried the enoki mushrooms in the wagyu steaks, and it was one of the best things I've ever eaten. It was just like it was so good.
All right, everybody, we're going to Rob's house for dinner.
I like to cook. I like to
Oh,
host. Cooking is
I
fun.
I do too. The sad thing is, I hate washing the dishes, but I do love to cook. So if I can just ever find someone to wash the dishes, I'm gonna have a match made in heaven.
See that actually and it drives my partner nuts because I do all the cooking and all the cleaning. I clean the kitchen, but I mean, A, it's my kitchen, so it's got to be cleaned a certain way. Um, but B, like there's something satisfying about it to me. Like I like just like putting on some music and like after dinner's over, it's like by the time I'm done, this place is going to be spotless and I'm going to feel really satisfied about that. And then I can just sit and enjoy the rest of the night.
I love it. So may I assume that you don't put on "Come On Eileen" while you're cooking?
Oh God, no. God, no. Um,
I will say that. So, uh, Rob talked about one of his main characters, Mark, having a sense of humor. I also know that Rob has a very twisted sense of humor, and I mean that in a nice way. So when I got to "Come On Eileen," I just laughed out loud. I'm like, of all the songs for you to pick, that was precious. I loved it.
Well, what was funny is that I actually have an '80s torture song, which is "Walk Like an Egyptian," and but the reason for that is that when I was in college, I lived with a music production major, and there's at one point he had to learn the bass line to the song for something, and but he didn't want to read the sheet music; he just wanted to do it by ear. So he's just over and over and over again for like a week. That is the only song he listened to, and I have a visceral reaction still whenever I hear it, but I used it as a gag in Paradox Hotel. So I was like, oh, I can't use that song as a gag again. So I was like, all right, well, what song, if it were played over and over and over again, would I eventually lose my mind? And I'm like, oh, come on, Eileen.
So mine is the rose. So one of my roommates in college was taking sign language, and he learned to sign to the rose. If I never hear that song ever again, it will please me greatly. The minute it comes on, I'm like, oh Lord, not again, please, because Walter played that damn thing for a month while he learned to sign it. I was like, oh my good heavens. But it's funny though. I think that that's something that Come On Eileen is a fun trigger for the reader because we get to see a side of your humor as an author, as well as have something to laugh along with the character about.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's like, it was interesting because this cell that Astrid is being kept in the beginning, where she's being sort of like tortured. It was I should have done my research because I keep on talking about it. I read about it a while ago. There was like a some kind of Spanish war where they had these cells where they would torture prisoners, and this was maybe like 70, 80, 100 years ago, something like that. But like the cots would be tilted and the floors would be uneven, and there were these geometric patterns on the wall that would make you nauseous, and they would play music constantly, and so it was like it wasn't like ripping your fingernails out and waterboarding torture. It was a more subtle form of torture that still kind of messed with you. And I thought that was kind of interesting because, going for the gross stuff is a little too easy. But playing in that weird psychological space kind of felt a little bit more interesting to me.
And I think because this was Astrid's story, that also works out really well for this particular character because it I don't want to say it fits her personality, but it certainly was something that would drive the majority of people absolutely insane. But because she has a little bit harder shell than her fellow members of Assassins Anonymous, these types of tortures would almost appeal to her, I think, in some ways, rather than waterboarding or ripping her fingernails out.
Yeah, I think there's a degree to which they almost underestimate her a little bit, where because they don't know her, they don't know what she's been through, and she says right off the bat like this is nothing compared to what I've been through. I can do this standing on my head.
Right. Well, and I think that it's when we don't know someone's backstory, and Astrid has been reticent to share her backstory, and part of it, so one of the things she says is, if I share my backstory, then I'm going to have to be honest, and then people are going to really see me. And I
Yeah,
think that's a fear that we all have. When we have interpersonal relationships, say with people at work, I've always been that person. If you tell everything, you've nothing to keep to yourself. You've no protection because you've bared your soul. But if you're going to be honest with someone, you really do have to bare your soul.
yeah, and that's hard. It's hard. It's I struggle with it constantly in terms of I'm look like I've got a very loyal readership of about a dozen people, and I've got a quasi public profile in the sense that like a lot of people who follow me on Instagram, I don't know who they are, and and it's weird for me because there's this how much do I want to share with my audience? How much do I want them to know about me? How much do I want them to see me? And I've been in situations where like I'll make like a joke on social media, like something kind of personal, but then like months later, like someone will reference it in a conversation who I don't really know, and all of a sudden I feel really uncomfortable. And they
Yeah.
didn't do anything wrong. It's I shared it. It was fair game. They remembered it. They made a comment, whatever. But it's just it's weird to be seen and to be perceived, and for people to have sort of like expectations and thoughts and perceived understandings about you. And it's a strange space to navigate. It's something that I'm constantly kind of like thinking about and struggling with because, I like talking to people, and there are certain things about my life I don't mind being out there. There are some things about my life, for example, my daughter. I don't like sharing a lot of stuff about my daughter because, she's 10. She doesn't understand social media yet, so she can't really fully consent to that kind of stuff. But I also don't want in like 20 years, if we're still here, for her to be like, I wish you hadn't done that.
Right. I totally agree. I have this big thing about politics. I mean, if you know me personally, you probably know exactly what my political views are, but I don't share it online because I don't want to be on an algorithm. And I know it sounds maybe a little fantastical, but in today's world, I don't think it's fantastic at all. I don't want to be seen by anybody that's elected. I just don't. I'd rather just be under the radar. I mean, I have some soapboxes I will definitely get on, but politics just isn't one of them because it's not going to change. If you like one way, you're not going to change because I like something else. That's not going to happen. So you'll see a lot of martinis and steaks on my feed. That's something I happily share.
Yeah, yeah, and and look, like that's totally a fair point. Like I get it because like this is a tough climate. I like talking about politics for a couple of reasons. One is because like I used to work in politics, so I'm kind of like a junkie for it. But there's also this part of me that feels like I do have a little bit of a platform, and like I'm in an enviable position. I'm a white dude. I present as straight. I have all my hair. Like, no one is coming for me. No one can hurt me. Like, I'm fine. So if I can, saying like, oh, hey, trans people are awesome and you all should like lay the fuck off them a little bit, I'm going to take that opportunity. I'm going to do it because I would just hope that even someone who's a little bit confused about it or on the fence might say, okay, let me think about this a little bit more deeply instead of just going along with whatever the current popular opinion is. Um, and also sometimes it's just a fun way for me to vent my frustration. But
Totally
because there's a lot
understand.
to be frustrated about. But yeah, I think that I'm not going to call it a responsibility. No one has a responsibility to do anything, but I see it for myself personally as an opportunity where it's like, okay, cool. Like I get to talk about stuff, and you know, I'm not scared of what someone's going to do to me. Because again, like no one's coming for me, so what do I have to lose?
Right. Right. And I think that that is something else that's mirrored in your book. You know, Mark sort of grapples a little bit because he's Astrid's sponsor. So Mark grapples a little bit about, is it his responsibility to save her, or is it her job to save herself? And I think that that sort of goes along with what you say. I mean, I do like to be supportive of trans people of color, things that are important to me. I just
Yeah,
don't,
yeah,
who the person is at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. I'm not going to chat about that because it's just not something I can fix. Not yet.
yeah,
I
yeah,
got ways to work on it, but just not yet. So it's like, you know, but I think that that's one of the, you know, one of the themes of both of your books in the Assassins Anonymous. You know, we have to save ourselves, and it's important that we make a stand and do the right thing by ourselves and by others. I mean, you know, what we do and how we reflect on others does affect them.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it's just, man, it's just a tough time out there for a lot of
It
people,
is.
you
It
know,
is.
and it sucks and it's frustrating. But yeah, you know, and I think that was an important point, you know, in Mark becoming Astrid's sponsor. Like, no, he's not responsible for her, but there is an opportunity to help her. And like the thing about recovery is like you can't force someone to do it. Like someone's got to want it,
Yep.
and you can't. And look, I say this as someone who is not in recovery, but has, you know, friends who are, and you know, people who have shared their stories with me so that I can better understand it. But you know, the idea that you can't tie up your own recovery in someone else's recovery, and you have to, like, you know, kind of let them do what they're going to do and be as supportive as you can possibly be, but understand that, like, if someone goes out, if someone relapses, like, that's not necessarily on you, and it's maybe not even necessarily on them. It's just it's just a difficult road to travel.
It is. And so I'm going to be very spoiler adjacent, but not do a spoiler. People have to read the Medusa Protocol to find out if someone relapses or not.
Yeah, you know, which was also like an interesting question about, like, because that was the one of the first things that, like, I went into Assassins Anonymous with, like, a bunch of my friends telling me, like, if you know, you have to treat this seriously, like recovery programs save people's lives. And you know, I was thinking a lot about Death Wish by Brian Garfield when I was writing this, because you know, that's an amazing book, by the way. I absolutely love it. But yeah, the Death Wish movie with Charles Bronson was based on a book by Brian Garfield. The difference is the novel is a repudiation of vigilantism. It's about how it's wrong. And then they made the Charlie Bronson movie where he's, like, you know, killing everybody. So and so that was the thing. It was like I didn't want it to be like a framing device and like a cute little hook, and then all of a sudden Mark is back to like murdering everyone. But at the same time, like, relapses can and do happen, and there's a
Yeah.
reality to that as well. And that's, you know, it's interesting. It's been a very fine line walking this, because again, like, I want to be as respectful as possible to the process, while also making it clear that this is like kind of a different thing. So
Right.
no one has yelled at me yet, so I think I'm doing okay.
I think you're doing fantastic. And I do know that Assassins Anonymous may be coming to screens near us soon. Where are you in the process with that?
So I don't think I'm allowed to say out loud. They
Oh,
hired a director.
okay.
No, no, no. Like, this part I could talk about. Yeah. So Steven Spielberg has it over at Amblin, where he would be a producer on it. And they hired a director who frankly is like kind of perfect for it. I'm very excited about that. And you know, supposedly he's very enthusiastic, and they're working on the script, and it should be done any second now. And you know, everyone's excited until one day they don't return your calls. But you know, it's a fun process to be a part of, and you know, I've got my fingers crossed because I would love to see it happen.
Me too. Me too. And I know this isn't your first time at that rodeo, so I hope this one goes through.
Yeah, you know, it's such a weird process. I mean, Paradox Hotel got really close and then kind of got killed by the writers and the actor strikes, because when Hollywood came back, everyone was like really scared. No one wanted to spend money, and especially no one wanted to do sci-fi because sci-fi is too expensive. So you know, that kind of that just like, you know, shot us in the mouth. But you know, Warehouse is still being developed for TV. It's moving over to a different production company, but you know, they seem very enthusiastic, and you know, we'll see how it goes.
Yep. I wish you the best of luck. And I also heard you recently say that you finished the third in Assassins Anonymous. Is that right?
I did. It's called Three Hitmen and a Baby, and it's actually my editor literally last night got me back her copy edits on it. She's very happy with it, which is great because I always assume anything I write is trash until someone tells me otherwise. And she read it, she really liked it. There's some notes, we're going to work on them, but it's nothing too crazy. And I told myself after I got off this recording, I was going to sit down and go over them, but I think I'm going to take a little break and have some lunch.
All right. All right.
But yeah. So the third one will be out next summer.
I'm looking forward to it already. That's the downside of reading great authors, because when you get to it says the end and a period, and it's like, well, darn, how long do I have to wait now? So I'm
Well,
happy to know I don't only have to wait 1 year.
well, technically too, I've got another series starting in January. So
Nice. Is it you alone, or are you working in collaboration with?
this is a collaboration. This is with Jeff Rake, who is the showrunner and creator of the TV show Manifest.
Oh,
And
look.
yeah, and actually, before I got on this podcast, as I was on a meeting with him and the editors, because we're talking about the second book now, because we're in the middle of it and we're reassessing something about it. But there's a cool storytelling opportunity we kind of stumbled upon. But yeah, no, that's a very cool like mystery box sci-fi series, and Jeff is, because he's a TV guy, he's like working on getting it made into a TV show, and but it's been an absolute blast. I love working with this guy.
Oh, I love that. I'm looking forward to that as well, Rob. Thank you for joining me. Again, the book is called The Medusa Protocol. It is out now. It's ready to be purchased, so go purchase.
All right, rock and roll. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of Out with Dan. You can find more information about this podcast and its host at outwithdan.com, on Twitter at outwithdan, and on Instagram and Facebook at GoOutWithDan. This podcast is hosted by Authors on the Air Global Radio Network, and the theme music is provided by bensound.com. Join us again soon for the next episode of Out with Dan.